Another day of special testing operations, this time for anyone who has been to the Bukit Merah Central FairPrice in recent weeks. Hey, something we need to be doing all the time from now, returning our food trays at hawker centres. And Singapore's competition watchdog wants to know, what do you have to say about a proposed joint venture between SIA and Japan's All Nippon Airways? Hello, I'm Olivia Quay. You're watching The Big Story live in the Straits Times newsroom. You can subscribe to our channel so you never miss a single episode. 18 new COVID-19 cases confirmed today, with 15 in the community. 5 are currently unlinked, and there were also 3 imported cases. The Health Ministry will share more details later tonight. In an update last night, MOH reported that a 44-year-old man has died of complications from COVID-19 infection. He had not been vaccinated and had a history of diabetes. This brings Singapore's death toll to 35. 2 live-wire sports betting venues at China Square and the Singapore Pools building have been closed following visits from an infected case. Closed until further notice, both outlets will be deep cleaned and disinfected. Singapore Pools said the patient had visited the China Square outlet from June 17th to 19th, but may have visited its building in Rocha on the 15th and 16th as well. All employees on duty at the 2 venues during the slated days have been advised to stay home. A relatively smooth testing process, meanwhile, this morning for staff and visitors to the FairPrice supermarket at 166 Bukit Merah Central. This comes as several cases were found among people who had been to the supermarket. The testing exercise is once again at Block 125A Bukit Merah View, and it will be open until Thursday. Those who want to be tested must make an appointment. Meanwhile, public spaces and one of the blocks at the Enabling Village in Red Hill are being cleaned today after a cleaner tested positive for COVID-19. The Information and Career Centre at the Nest block will also be closed from today to July the 5th. Operating hours for some tenants at the Academy block may be affected, including NTUC FairPrice, Professor Braun Cafe, as well as some Swiss supplies and services. Over 1 billion vaccine doses have been administered in China. On some days in recent weeks, there were 20 million jabs given daily. Well, China has 4 vaccines available to its public. One of them, from Sinovac, has started being administered in Singapore by private clinics. When the World Health Organization endorsed Sinovac's vaccine for emergency use this month, it said that it was only 51% effective at preventing symptomatic disease. Within China as well, scientists have acknowledged that they need to ensure the Sinovac jabs work better. With more, our China correspondent Elizabeth Law joins me now from Beijing. So Liz, we have heard accounts from people here who prefer the Sinovac vaccine because they're hoping to enter China without quarantine. But what are China's considerations when it comes to allowing travellers into the country who have been vaccinated with Sinovac's shot?
Right. So, Ollie, I think one misconception that we really do have to put to rest is the fact that simply having a vaccine is going to allow you quarantine-free travel in China. I think, and by all signs, China's government is not going to lift the quarantine requirement anytime soon. They have, in fact, in recent weeks, actually doubled down on this whole quarantine requirement. There are many cities, especially those with a lot of international flights, that are, in fact, increasing quarantine regulations from 14 days, 21 days for some, or 14 plus, and there are places that essentially you spend 28 days in quarantine or some sort of isolation away from the general population. So I honestly don't think having a vaccine is going to allow anyone into China quarantine free. But that being said, having a Chinese-made vaccine, be it Sinovac, be it Sinopharm, or any of the other vaccines that have been provided internationally, will allow you greater ease of access into China, because noted the borders are still closed and people do have to apply for special visas, and having a Chinese-made vaccine will allow you to acquire one of these visas more easily. But whether having a vaccine will allow you to enter China without any quarantine, I highly doubt it.
Well, thanks for clearing that up, Liz. So last week, Singapore's Director of Medical Services, Associate Professor Kenneth Mark, said that he's worried about reports from other countries of people becoming sick with COVID-19 even after receiving Sinovac shot. He cited cases in Indonesia. Let's have a listen first.
The Sinovac vaccine is one that we've now allowed to be used out of the original stockpile we had based on the special access route framework, but it still is a vaccine that we were unfortunately unable to approve using HSA's PISA framework, simply because there still is some outstanding data that the manufacturer has not provided to HSA that gives us the complete assurance about the quality and safety profile for the vaccines. We look forward, if data becomes available, for us then to complete this process of evaluation, but unfortunately we're not able to do so. So we've been looking at the real world evidence, looking internationally, the experience of other countries which have used these vaccines as well. Some of these countries are very close to us, including our regional neighbors like Indonesia. There is a significant risk of vaccine breakthrough. We've seen a more recent report of healthcare workers in Indonesia still being infected. So these problems still arise.
Right, so Liz, having heard that, how is China addressing the issue of Sinovac's vaccine efficacy?
Right. So there have been discussions by senior health officials in recent months. Actually, they do understand that the Sinovac vaccine isn't as effective as they would like it to be. Well, it is effective to an extent. It meets the 50% threshold. But the fact is that they realize that that is still kind of low. And the head of the CDC, George Gao, had made comments earlier saying that there are ways that they are looking at, perhaps even mixing vaccine shots from different vaccine makers, such as like maybe if you were to have Sinovac as your first shot and then a booster from another producer, that could be one of the ways to increase efficacy. And that is something that the Chinese are looking at. However, that being said, a lot of people have pointed to the fact that Sinovac and Sinopharm as well, of course, are now on the WHO's emergency use list, which means that it technically should be, and questioning why isn't Singapore allowing for it. Well, there are two things here. One is that Singapore has really one of the most rigorous and thorough vaccine approval, or in fact drug approval system anywhere in the world. And so I think the standard is very high. And number two is that being on the WHO list means that these vaccines will be able to be used for COVAX. And COVAX is about having equal access to countries which might be developing, and therefore having the Chinese vaccines, which are inactivated vaccines and don't require special storage methods, means that it would work a lot better for developing countries which might not have the resources and the technology like Singapore or other more wealthy economies.
Of course. Well, focusing on China, over 1 billion people there have been vaccinated, a milestone that was days ago. So Liz, the vaccination campaign got off to a slow start, right? So what changed? And I guess what's next for China's vaccination campaign?
So yes, it did get off to a slow start, and as I've written about it before, it was down to two things. One was that there was complacency because of the way how well the situation had been controlled in China. So people just didn't, they just didn't feel a need to be vaccinated. And secondly, is that vaccines in this country have had a history where there were several scandals of either expired vaccine or ineffective vaccine. So people were understandably a little bit more worried. But I think there were also a couple of factors that really push people to get vaccinated very quickly. I would say it's both methods. Talking about soft power, it would be things like propaganda campaigns, the government offering incentives such as shopping vouchers, eggs, ice cream, if you were to go and get vaccinated. Of course, vaccination is fully free, which is great. And also they had mobile clinics making it easier for people to get vaccinated. And the other thing that really, really contributed significantly to people getting a jab is actually the fact that there have been sporadic outbreaks, and fairly serious ones, I might add, in Dalian, and now as we're seeing in Guangdong province, in Guangzhou and in Shenzhen. So that has really given people a sense of urgency.
Well, Liz, thank you so much for sharing the latest on the show. I've been speaking with Elizabeth Law, China correspondent for the Straits Times. Back home, the woman who starved and tortured her Myanmar domestic helper to death was sentenced to 30 years jail today. In sentencing, the High Court judge described the case as among the worst type of culpable homicide, noting that the victim was made to suffer agonizing harm for a long time before she died. In February, Gayatri Murugayan had pleaded guilty to 28 charges. The most serious was culpable homicide, for which prosecutors had sought the maximum sentence of life imprisonment. The Progress Singapore Party has accepted the challenge to debate employment policies and the Singapore-India Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement, which was mooted by Law and Home Affairs Minister K. Shanmugam in May. Writing on Facebook, non-constituency MP Leong Man Wai said PSP would seek further information at next month's parliamentary sitting. Mr. Leong told the Straits Times that the party would be asking questions related to the number of employment passes, S-passes and work passes issued from 2005 to 2020. From June 30th, employers will receive job support scheme payouts totaling more than $2.2 billion, which will support the wages of over 2 million local workers. Eligible employers will be notified by post of their payout amount later this month. With this, more than $26.7 billion in JSS support would have been dispersed. Now, the pandemic has underscored the importance of public hygiene and cleanliness in places like hawker centres. Despite years of educational efforts to change the behaviour and mindsets of diners, thousands had to be reminded to return their dirty trays. Multimedia journalist Kimberly Zhao files this report from Northbridge Road Market and Food Centre.
With dining in allowed again and people returning to hawker centres, are they cleaning up after themselves? As part of ongoing efforts to maintain high standards of public hygiene and cleanliness amid the pandemic, since June 1st, it's mandatory for patrons to return their trays and clear their table litter. But to help them adjust, no enforcement action will be taken until August 31st.
You know, this practice of clearing our tables after yourselves, after eating at our public dining places, not only would show consideration to other diners, but would also provide our cleaners as well as ultimately ourselves with a cleaner and safer environment. And returning your used crockery and tray would also help to reduce the workload of the cleaners so that they can focus on cleaning and sanitizing the tables, as well as facilitate the faster turnover of tables during peak meal times. And I think this is indeed very useful at a time when we are actually limiting the number of diners per table. I think this will strengthen our resilience against COVID-19 and future public health threats. And indeed, I actually hope that this habit of clearing our tables after yourselves at public dining places will become a habit that we will all be proud of.
Here at Northbridge Road Food Centre, it appears most people have complied with the rules. We observed them putting their used bowls and cutlery back onto trays and bringing them to the tray return stations. If they forget, banners and little stands on the tables have been set up with helpful reminders.
好像10个哈，有4、5个这样拿来还嘛，昨天就3个了，10个只有3个来还，我很高兴，我不怕没有工作，我老板不要紧，他讲你们做你们的，我们还会照请你们，他讲你们不用担心。
早上我们也是遇到，叫他们收，他们不要收的。他说他是来吃东西的，他没有负责，他说他不管，我们是做这行公事，我们负责，不关他的事。你罚款他，他就知道哦，原来不可以开玩笑，政府讲到做到，说叫我们自动，我们不收又不听讲，我们罚款。
Generally, they will say the cleaning job is not on them lah. Basically, they want the cleaners to do the cleaning job. But our officers will actually try to explain to them that the cleaners have their own duty at the tray return rack. So once everyone play their part, the workflow will work smoothly, and then everything flow accordingly during peak period. The tray and crockery will be turned over very fast lah. Okay, so normally the officers will approach them and greet them and remind them that after you have finished your meal, please return the dirty tray and crockery. And if they leave without clearing their own tray and crockery, the officers will approach them as well to remind them. Okay, so come September, we will still advise first. It's only when they fail to listen to our advisory, then we will proceed to take enforcement action. We will request for their particulars and then take back end to process. So we will send them letters.
First-time offenders will be given a written warning. Second-time offenders will face a $300 composition fine, and subsequent offences may lead to court fines, which can go up to $2,000 for the first conviction. Kimberly Jiao for the Straits Times.
Well, moving on, even if travel remains uncertain, airlines continue to make preparations for the day when aviation and tourism bounce back. For those looking to vacation in Japan, again, always a popular destination, you may get to enjoy travel perks with Singapore Airlines in the process of working out a business tie-in with Japan-based airline All Nippon Airways. And you can now also weigh in on this partnership as Singapore's competition watchdog is gathering public feedback on this proposed joint venture. Well, the Straits Times' associate editor, Ven Srinivasan, is here to shed more light on this. Welcome back to the show, Ven. So why All Nippon Airways out of all the other airlines?
Well, actually, it is not just Nippon Airways. I mean, this deal was signed in January 2020, more than a year ago. So literally, this was the last event. And it was the latest in a series of joint ventures that Singapore Airlines signed. For example, Singapore Airlines already has similar arrangements with Lufthansa, SAS of Northern Europe, and it has got an extensive partnership agreement with Virgin Australia as well. So it's not particularly unique, but what's caught the attention is it's not done anything in the last 16 months. And this deal was inked in January 2020. Coming up, there's going to be one more deal that's going to be announced. That's with a similar deal with Malaysia Airlines, I believe.
I see. Well, Ven, according to both airlines, the proposed cooperation, quote, is expected to result in significant consumer and economic benefits and efficiencies. What sort of benefits could travellers see with this tie-up?
Well, for one thing, what they would see is a broader choice. For example, you can. What will happen is that there will be seamless travel. There'll be one airfare for a single destination on either airline. Greater conveniences because they'll coordinate their schedules. So flying from Japan into Singapore and then out of Singapore to India, Indonesia, Australia, anywhere in Southeast Asia will be very easy for Japanese travelers. And for Singapore travelers, you can hop onto an ANA flight or a Singapore Airlines flight and get to multiple destinations in Japan. Down the road, I believe they will expand this to ANA's other Pacific destinations as well. For example, maybe down the road, a year down the road, Honolulu could be back on the travel itinerary. So it basically is and then on top of that, business travelers will also share lounge, and then you also get frequent flyer points. Either airline you travel on, you get the frequent flying points. So essentially, it is almost like flying in a single airline to both destinations. Both airlines work very closely to provide seamless travel, coordinate their schedules. So you fly into Changi, within an hour you're on a Singapore Airlines flight that takes you to wherever you want to go. Say a Japanese traveler wants to go to Bali or Jakarta or whatever. So it's essentially seamless travel, convenient travel.
Well, Ven, you mentioned earlier that this tie-up with ANA is the latest in a series of joint ventures that SIA has with other airlines. Are these kind of business tie-ups the future of SIA and other airlines?
Well, basically, they are airlines. In the post-COVID period now, it's more important for airlines to improve the efficiency of the use of assets. Things have changed. So what they can do is, instead of buying a whole bunch of extra aircraft and getting their balance sheet all hot and heavy, they can actually establish strategic partnerships with each other. So I think this is, this is the future. The future is about coordinating travel schedules, coordinating frequent flyer, joining up frequent flyer programs, share revenues as ANA and SIA does. So that's the future, actually, going forward. Because the aviation industry has been so badly hit by COVID, they got to think about how to scale up without necessarily coming out with a lot of money individually.
I see. Well, very good points made there. Thanks so much for that, Ven. That was the Straits Times' associate editor, Ven Srinivasan. You can visit straitstimes.com for more news and videos and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. I'm Olivia Quay. See you tomorrow on The Big Story.